going to start sharing my. I'm just going to start sharing my screen now, so you can see my slides. How's that?
That looks good.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Jo. So, as I said, I'm Frances Harris, and I'm the Community Facilities Advisor for Northamptonshire Acre. Before we kick off properly, I just wanted to give you a little bit of background information about us as an organisation. We're a charity. We were founded in 1947, and ACRE stands for Action with Communities in Rural England, which gives a pretty good clue to the sort of work that we do. And in fact, we're the only charity in the county that works exclusively with rural communities. And this is predominantly support and advice on community development, and that's things like neighbourhood plans, good neighbour schemes, community buildings, which is my area of work, but we also provide help in relation to community shops and pubs. We have a bulk oil buying scheme, and we also have a new project at the moment called the Sustainable Food Network, which is based in the area of Northamptonshire Council. The particular bit that I do is to provide help and support for what I broadly call community facilities. What that really means is a mixture of community buildings like village halls and church halls, but also recreation grounds, playing fields and parks. And I provide advice on a range of things to do with governance, so governing documents and charity trustee roles, applicable law, so that might be charity law or health and safety. I can provide help with navigating Charity Commission regulations, so typically that will be, reporting obligations. And then we have sample documentation that we can give to groups, such as sample policies and model documents like model leases and licenses to occupy. So things like that. We do also provide help in terms of funding suggestions, and we can help with grant funding applications. I do just want to talk a little bit about the Acre Network, because that has a bearing on the Rural Community Buildings Loan Fund. We, Northamptonshire Acre, are part of something called the Acre Network. And essentially speaking, that is a network of 38 charitable local development agencies. So essentially speaking, there's an organisation such as Northamptonshire Acre in pretty much every county in England. And put together, that forms the Acre Network. It's part funded by DEFRA, and we sort of sit underneath an umbrella body, which is National Acre. And National Acre provides our national interface. And another, just a quick word about the Platinum Jubilee Fund. That's not really what I'm supposed to be talking about today, but it was only announced, oh gosh, just over a week ago now. And this is good news for village halls. It's a new £3 million fund. It's a DEFRA fund. And over the next 3 years, it'll provide help for village halls. It's thought for around possibly 125 village halls will benefit. And it's to help them carry out improvements, things like installing Wi-Fi and modernising facilities. That's all we know at the moment. And more information is to be announced, and I will let everyone know as soon as that information is being made available. So the Rural Community Buildings Loan Fund, which is really what I'm going to be talking about this afternoon. As the name would suggest, it's a loan fund, and it's designed to help community buildings. It's very useful because it can help to fill temporary funding gaps, and funds can be made pretty much available pretty much immediately. And it offers a flexible, easy to understand repayment system, unlike many commercial loan arrangements. It's a £700,000 pot of funding. It's DEFRA funding, and it's managed by the umbrella organisation I mentioned earlier, National Acre. It was started, would you believe, in the 1930s, so it's been going on for some time now. And the average loan is around £15,000, and there are about 10 to 14 new loans made per year. So who can apply? Well, again, as the name would suggest, it's people, it's groups, community groups who manage community buildings. So it's things like village halls, parish halls, community centres, reading rooms and church halls. Might be possible also to fund sort of sports pavilions, but the key thing is they do need to be widely used by the community. And it's worth remembering that National Acre, when assessing an application, will want to see evidence that your project your building is widely used by the community and that there is good community support for what you're doing. And in terms of what a loan could be used for, it's essentially for capital projects. So it can aid cash flow on large building projects quite often, especially with large build projects. It can be a bit of a problem. You need to start paying, doing the work and paying for it, but your grant funding won't necessarily have come in yet. So it can cover that tricky period. It's useful for helping with the construction of new community buildings, extensions and renovations, and emergency repairs. One area it can help with is, for example, car parks, because quite often it's difficult to get grant funds for car parks. So this could be an option for you. It's worth bearing in mind that it won't cover fixtures and fittings. It is very much just capital projects. And one advantage is you can apply even if the project has started. There's a very simple process for making an application. You just need to make an initial inquiry either to National Acre Direct, or you can come to us here at Northamptonshire Acre. National Acre then supplies the relevant paperwork, and that will include the application form. And then we here at Northamptonshire Acre will provide guidance for applicants regarding their application and their supporting documentation. And then we, Northamptonshire Acre, we submit the paperwork to National Acre. National Acre assesses the application, and if they have any questions, need to make any further inquiries, they'll come back to us, Northamptonshire Acre, and we'll liaise with the applicant to try and get answer to whatever those queries are. The final decision is made by National Acre. And again, as I mentioned before, there are no application deadlines, which is really handy. There are certain conditions attached to these loans. So I mentioned before, they're usually around £15,000. They can go up to 20,000, occasionally larger, but not very often. You do need to show that you have security of tenure, either because you own, the group owns the building on a freehold basis, or if the property is held on a leasehold basis, the lease needs to have at least 21 years to run. The loan plus interest can be repaid usually within 5 or 8 years. But one of the good things is that there are no penalties for early repayment. So with the example I gave you earlier, with bigger build projects where you have this funding shortfall, cash flow issue, with where you're spending funding before your grant funding comes in, as soon as you get your grant funding, you can then immediately, if you're in a position to do so, repay the loan, and you don't pay any penalties. And I've just put on this slide here contact information. On the left-hand side, that's National Acre. If you Google Acre, you'll easily find those details. Alternatively, if you wanted to make an initial inquiry via us here at Northamptonshire Acre, I've put our details there. And again, if you Google us, you can find our contact information on our website. So that's pretty much me. So I'll stop sharing my screen now. And I said I'd be brief, and I think I have been. So,
do we have any questions? Anybody?
Doesn't look like it, does it? No.
No.
Shall I hand over to Joanna?
Yes, please.
Hi there, I'm Joanna Browning, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the funding that Northamptonshire Acre has available for Good Neighbours schemes. So I'm going to start, hopefully, sharing my screen now. Okay, can people see that?
That's great, Joanna.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the Good Neighbours scheme, the 2 field workers employed to deliver this, myself and my colleague Claire Yao, who you can see there. So Good Neighbours schemes are run by local volunteers who provide day-to-day support for other residents who might need help on occasional or maybe regular basis. For older people, this support may enable them to live independently in their own homes and their communities for longer. And the aim is to reduce feelings of isolation and loneliness. It's low-level, reliable support near where you live. It's not intended to provide social or personal care. It's not about tasks that need to be done by qualified tradesmen. So what sort of assistance can be offered by a Good Neighbours scheme? Well, things such as household tasks, changing light bulbs, checking smoke alarms. It could be giving a lift to a surgery or a clinic, or for hospital visiting. Someone might be available to help people to fill in forms, to read or write letters, identify postal and email scams, and just set people's minds at rest if they're not sure about what's coming through their door. Might be dog walking or caring for pets during holiday or illness. Could be help with shopping. It could be help with visiting online shops. It could be befriending. It is often just about a cup of tea and a chat, or making a regular phone call to someone just to check in with them and make sure that they're okay. And some communities provide food swaps or food boxes, and some go to all sorts of different creative ways of swapping plants in growing seasons, or vegetables, all sorts of things that will just serve the community, really. So each of the Good Neighbours schemes is going to be different. A steering group will define what assistance they want to offer in their community and how large an area they feel that they're able to cover. Each scheme to some extent depends on the range of skills of each of the volunteers. And I think one of the things that volunteers have found is that things that they always thought everybody could do are actually unique to them. So some people do find sitting on the telephone and chatting to people much easier than others, whereas other people find organising a meet-up together or sorting out who's going to open up the village hall, that's their strength. So it's based on the skills that each group has, the skills that each volunteer has. And although levels of activity do vary greatly from scheme to scheme, it is not uncommon for a single scheme to receive around 5 requests for help each week. This obviously went up dramatically for those that were running through the pandemic and has quietened down. And some schemes will say that they may some months only get 5 a month rather than a week. So it's very dependent on the scheme and on what's going on. So how it works. So there'll be a coordinator or a duty officer who has a mobile phone, has a list of all the volunteers, what those volunteers can offer and when they can offer their help. Any resident can, in genuine need of help, can ring the number. The coordinator then will identify an available volunteer who can provide the help and will contact the caller. The volunteer will contact the resident to arrange a time of visit or organise what it is that they need to do. And the coordinator can also signpost to voluntary, charity or statutory organisations or professional companies if the need is outside of the volunteer remit. Claire and I also work with the Rural Wellbeing Service, and so we make sure that we're on hand if any of the Good Neighbour schemes, duty officers, coordinators want to call us and find out more information about those sort of organisations. For example, Northamptonshire Sports, Cooking Good, Northamptonshire Carers, Deaf Connect. We don't promote any companies that will do work. We just work with partner organisations and charities in this situation. So a scheme that's organised by a small steering group would start off by determining the need and the capacity for a scheme. They would recruit volunteers, decide what they can offer, and remember all these schemes are absolutely individual. There is no requisite to offer enormous amounts of help if there are only 3 people who know that they can have limited time. The steering group will then get funding and insurance, arrange training and DBS checks if those are needed, and then purchase a mobile phone or a laptop if that's required, and assist in setting up activities and events. It says there at the bottom, help is given to those in need free of charge, although a reasonable charge can be made if a volunteer's car is used. And that's the basis that most of the Good Neighbour schemes work on. This is entirely voluntary. And if people would like to give a donation, that is something that they can talk to their organisers about. The only time when there would be an expectation for some sort of payment is just to cover fuel costs, as we know how tricky that is at the moment. So, what's Acre's role in this? Well, the National Lottery Community Fund has provided over £272,000 for a 3-year project run through Northamptonshire Acre. And that project is to set up and support 30 Good Neighbour schemes across Kettering, Corby, Wellingborough and East Northants. And we're pertinent to the name being Acre, to those communities in rural England or in rural Northamptonshire. The money covers the 2 full-time field workers to help set up the schemes and support them. In fact, it's 1 full-time field worker, which is Claire, and I work 3 days a week. And there is up to £700 available for each scheme to set up. The costs involved, as I mentioned before, is going to be something like the mobile phone or possibly a laptop, more likely to be some promotional materials so that people can get the information out. It's really, really key to let people in the community know what's happening, how this is going to work, and what the number is to contact the scheme on. And each year we will hold a Good Neighbour annual event. We have one coming up on the 22nd of June, where the volunteers from all the Good Neighbour schemes, those that we help support in the west of the county and the new ones that have been set up through this project in the north and east of the county, we're having a volunteer celebration evening to really just thank them for all the work that they do. So setting up a scheme. Identify need and volunteers through a survey. This is something that Claire and I can help groups work with, so and get right. It's important to know where the need is and what the need is. Then needs a steering group, a constitution, and a bank account, which should be separate to the parish council bank account. Insurance, mobile phone, laptop, marketing and publicity materials, DBS checks for volunteers, and training. All those things Claire and I can help with. And the things that we don't want people to feel is this. We know that lots of people have helped their neighbours during the pandemic. We know that a lot of people still help their neighbours, and suddenly the idea of formalising what they're doing, or perhaps a small group that they're part of, what they're doing, the idea of all the paperwork, all the bureaucracy, all the policies, the DBS checks, just can be completely overwhelming sometimes. And for people perhaps who've not set up groups before or formally, they might feel like they're wandering around in the dark, there's no one to help. And Claire and I really don't want people to feel like this. We want to support people to be able to continue to volunteer and support other people in their villages and their communities. So what can we offer? Well, as part of our National Lottery community funding, we can offer £700 for startup costs. Now, that is geographically, so that is in North Northamptonshire at the moment. But if groups are keen to join the Good Neighbours scheme, please don't let this put you off, because we can help in other ways. We provide free toolkit and step-by-step guides covering all sorts of aspects of setting up, and these were developed with existing schemes, so they are really, really full of valuable information, the things that can go right and the things that can go wrong. We have free templates of constitutions, volunteer forms, policies, etc. We provide evaluation forms for monitoring the scheme, which is very useful for further funding. Other schemes can offer support with experience, with policies, with ideas, with mentoring. We've got really helpful people who want to help others and make other schemes a success. And NACRE provides regular get-togethers for schemes on the network, mostly by Zoom, but as mentioned, that get-together in a couple of weeks' time, and free training for volunteers if that's required. We recently had an ex-police officer from Opera Pete who just did some basic training on helping people identify fraud and feel a bit more confident about how and who they should talk to on the telephone. So those are the things that Claire and I can help with from NACRE. The question that we quite often get asked is from people who are already running community groups, so whether they can take advantage of the funding in order to become part of the Good Neighbours scheme network. And the answer is yes. We welcome existing neighbourhood groups to join the network and access help and support. We don't expect the names to be changed, so if you have Hanwell Helpers or whoever it might be, you can still keep it as Hanwell Helpers, but it's just part of the Good Neighbours scheme network. But we do ask that the group becomes constituted and sets up a bank account, which you'll need for funding, and that relevant policies are made sure that you have them. So safeguarding, for example, and we will provide help with that. We, Claire and I, do not interfere or take over the group. The group will still be managed, still be run by the community. We're just here to help and support if needed. And so the final slide is just our information here at Northants Acre. You can go to our website or contact us by email. And Claire and I would be really very, very happy to help you and to talk through any information that you need clarifying in order to apply for the funds. And that's it. Are there any questions?